Hi everyone! Welcome back to another episode of our beginner watercolor tutorial series. In today's video, I will be teaching everyone how to paint a salted egg yolk pastry. For the first step, we'll start by outlining the shapes. So I'm going to be drawing two pastries. One of them is going to be sliced in half and it will be the one in front, while the one at the back is going to be a full pastry. While you're adding in details for the egg yolk for the one that's sliced in half, you have to be careful not to make the egg yolk too circular, otherwise it won't look as realistic. So now that our base sketch is done, we're going to move on to mixing our colors so we can apply the first base layer. What I added was yellow ochre, a little bit of yellow, and also peach into the color mixture on the right. And to that, I added water in order to thin out the paint so that it comes off as a very light layer. And what we're going to do is gently apply this across the pastries and the egg yolk areas. Before we move on to paint the red bean filling, you have to make sure that the previous layer of paint for the pastries is dry. And because we're working with a smaller area, I've now switched over to a smaller brush, as you can see. We're going to mix together three colors for the red bean filling. One is any kind of shade of red, as well as any shade of purple and burnt umber. Just make sure that the pastry area is dry and then gently apply one layer of base color to the red bean filling. Now we're going to add in a little bit of burnt sienna to our pastry color mixture, and we're going to first start by outlining the pastries. For the second layer of paint, we're just going to gently brush on the darker color mixture of paint along the top part of the pastry. To paint the shadow areas, I've actually used a little bit of the red bean filling color that we mixed earlier and use that to paint that area. When we're adding more layers of paint to the egg yolk, I like to start with the darkest part of the yolk first and move outwards. So to get the color to be a little bit more saturated and dark, I added more yellow and also burnt sienna to the color mixture. Add a little bit of the same color to the areas below the egg yolk where it seeps through to the red bean filling. This gives it a little bit more of a realistic look. After completing our second layer for the pastry, it's time to move on to the red bean filling again. Here, I've darkened the mixture by adding more burnt umber and purple. This area looks better when you paint it using a wet on wet look, and to achieve this, you're going to have to pick up a bit more water in your paintbrush every single time you brush it along the paper. And then just put a little bit more paint onto the wet areas with the paintbrush. Keep alternating between the pastry areas and the red bean filling areas. When one area dries, move on to the other one. We're going to start working on more of the details, so I switched to a smaller brush. And I'm going to actually start by mixing more brown into the mixture so that I can color in the different layers for the pastry. Now that the egg yolk area has dried, I'm going to make this area a bit more saturated by adding in more yellow color. When we're darkening the area under the egg yolk, remember to apply a wet on wet technique. Here you can see how the paint is slowly moving towards each other and really blending in to create that gradient look. Over these next couple of steps, you'll notice that what I'm doing is I'm adding in more layers to the red bean filling as well as the pastry areas to darken up the colors and make them look more realistic. For the shadow areas, I'm mixing together a new color. I'm adding in a bit of blue, a little bit of purple, and also yellow ochre. Using our small paintbrush, we're going to just gently outline the pastries right now with this shadow color. In order to add more layers to this area, I'm going to mix a darker version of this shadow color. The full pastry at the back is looking a little bit dull right now, so I will raise the saturation levels by adding in more yellow paint. And remember to paint this about halfway up along the pastry because we want this to look like the egg wash that usually goes on top of these pastries. The next step is to darken the shadow area of the full pastry. Mix together black paint as well as a little bit of ultramarine blue. What you're going to do with your small paintbrush is to slowly paint on a couple of sesame seeds on top of the pastries. The last step is to add more contrast to the painting. Darken some areas of the red bean filling and also the egg yolk. And now we're all done.